I'm Amanda Wilson, 32 years old, and I still remember how my hands trembled opening that bank envelope. $600,000 of mortgage debt in my name for a house I'd never seen. My sister Heather lived there with her husband, enjoying granite countertops and a 3-car garage, all purchased with my stolen identity. When I confronted my family, my father's words cut deep. "Pay for your sister. It's your duty." I smiled, but what I did next made their faces go pale. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe because this family betrayal story is going to take turns you won't believe. Before the envelope that changed everything, my life felt stable and on track. I had worked as a software engineer at Horizon Technologies for 5 years, climbing steadily through the ranks. Just 2 months earlier, I'd received a promotion to senior developer with a generous salary bump that finally put me in position to consider buying my own place. My modest 1-bedroom apartment in Seattle suited me well enough, but I'd always dreamed of owning something that was truly mine. I'm naturally careful with money. Growing up watching my parents argue about finances taught me early lessons about saving and planning. By 32, I had an emergency fund, retirement savings, and a down payment fund that was nearly ready. My credit score was 810, something I maintained with almost religious dedication. I paid every bill on time, kept my credit utilization low, and avoided unnecessary debt. Financial security wasn't just a goal, it was my safety net in a world that often felt unpredictable. My close circle included a few trusted coworkers who had become genuine friends over years of shared deadlines and coffee breaks. Zoe from the marketing department had been my closest confidant since we bonded over a disastrous company retreat 3 years ago. I dated occasionally, but nothing serious had materialized. Most men I met couldn't understand my dedication to work and financial stability, often mistaking it for coldness rather than self-preservation. The first hint that something was wrong came on a rainy Tuesday in March. I had scheduled a meeting with Darlene Evans, a mortgage broker recommended by a colleague, to discuss pre-approval for a modest condo I'd been eyeing in a quiet neighborhood. The meeting started normally, with Darlene asking about my income, employment history, and financial goals. She seemed impressed by my preparation, nodding approvingly at my organized documentation. "You've clearly done your homework, Amanda," she said, typing my information into her system. "Let me just run a quick credit check, and we should be able to give you a preliminary approval today." I waited, scrolling through emails on my phone while she worked. When I looked up, her expression had completely changed. "Amanda," she said slowly, "there's something we need to discuss. There appears to be a significant issue with your credit report." My stomach tightened immediately. "What kind of issue?" She turned her monitor so I could see. "According to this, you already have a mortgage loan for $600,000 with First National Bank. It was taken out 4 months ago." I laughed, thinking it was some kind of system error. "That's impossible. I've never applied for a mortgage before today. Let me print the full report for you." The pages she handed me moments later turned my confusion to horror. There it was in black and white, a $600,000 mortgage loan in my name, with monthly payments of $3,600. My perfect credit score had plummeted to 580. The report showed 2 missed payments already. "There must be some mistake," I said, my voice barely audible. "This isn't mine." Darlene's expression was sympathetic but professional. Identity theft is unfortunately common these days. I recommend contacting the credit bureaus immediately to report fraud. I left her office in a daze, calling the customer service number for the credit bureau before I even reached my car. The representative was polite but unhelpful, explaining that I needed to contact the bank that issued the mortgage to begin the fraud investigation process. By the time I reached home, I had worked myself into a panic. I called First National Bank, expecting a straightforward process to report the fraud. Instead, the conversation took a disturbing turn. "Yes, Ms. Wilson, I can see the mortgage here in our system," the representative said after verifying my identity. It appears to be properly executed with your signature on all the required documents. The property is located at 427 Lakeview Drive in Bellevue. But I never signed anything. I insisted, pacing my small living room. I've never even heard of this address. I understand your concern, but our records show otherwise. Would you like me to email you copies of the signed documents for your review? Yes, please, I said, hoping there would be some obvious forgery I could point to. While waiting for the email, I typed the Bellevue address into Google. The search returned images of a beautiful two-story colonial with a manicured lawn and circular driveway. It looked vaguely familiar, and after a moment of confusion, I realized why. I had seen this house before on my sister's Instagram. Several photos showed Heather and her husband Thomas posing proudly in front of that same distinctive blue door. The caption read, "Finally home sweet home." So blessed. My parents had mentioned Heather and Thomas buying a house during Thanksgiving dinner. They had gushed about the neighborhood, the schools for future grandchildren, the gourmet kitchen. Not once did anyone mention my involvement. More tellingly, despite living only 30 minutes away, I had never been invited to see this house that was apparently in my name. The bank's email arrived, containing PDF copies of the mortgage application, approval, and closing documents. There was my signature on every page, looking close enough to authentic that a bank employee would accept it, but with subtle differences I could immediately recognize. The closing date was December 12th, a day I had been in San Francisco for a tech conference, hundreds of miles from any bank office. My hands began to shake as the implications became clear. This wasn't random identity theft. This was deliberate, calculated fraud committed by people who knew me, who had access to my personal information, who could reasonably forge my signature. People who knew I wouldn't be in town on December 12th. My family had stolen my identity to buy my sister a house. I felt physically ill, rushing to the bathroom as nausea overwhelmed me. After splashing cold water on my face, I stared at my reflection, barely recognizing the pale, shocked woman looking back at me. Back at my laptop, I began methodically documenting everything. I checked my calendar and email records, confirming my San Francisco alibi. I screenshot my sister's social media posts about the house, including one that thanked amazing family support for making their dream home possible. I searched my memory for any conversations about co-signing or helping with a mortgage and found none. In one evening, my financial future had been shattered. The down payment I'd spent years saving would now go toward legal fees. The perfect credit score I'd built through careful planning was destroyed. The dream of my own home had vanished, replaced by a $600,000 debt for a house I'd never set foot in. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the signatures that weren't mine, the house that wasn't mine, the debt that shouldn't be mine. By morning, shock had given way to a cold, clear anger. I needed answers, and I knew exactly where to find them. To understand why my family believed they could take out a mortgage in my name, you need to understand the Wilson family dynamics. I grew up in a modest 3-bedroom house in a Portland suburb with my parents, Paul and Eleanor Wilson, my younger sister Heather, and our brother Kevin. From the outside, we appeared to be a typical middle-class family with traditional values and close relationships. My father built a successful accounting practice through years of dedicated work. He took pride in providing for his family, often reminding us of the sacrifices he made so we could have opportunities he never had. My mother maintained our home and coordinated our busy lives with cheerful efficiency. Her favorite phrase, repeated at every family disagreement, was "family comes first, always." As the oldest child, I learned responsibility early. By 10, I was helping with household chores and watching my siblings after school. By 16, I had my first job at the local grocery store, saving most of my earnings for college. My parents praised my maturity and work ethic, but their praise came with increasingly heavy expectations. "Amanda always handles things," became my mother's mantra whenever problems arose. Whether it was tutoring Kevin through algebra or helping Heather with college applications, I was the family problem solver. My father reinforced this role with his constant reminder, "We Wilsons look out for each other." That's what family means. Heather, 5 years younger than me, grew up in a different reality. Where I faced high expectations and responsibility, Heather received indulgence and protection. Her artistic talents were celebrated and nurtured with expensive lessons. Her academic struggles were addressed with private tutors my parents couldn't really afford. Her emotional outbursts were met with patience and understanding, while mine were labeled as being difficult. By the time Heather entered college to study marketing, a clear pattern had emerged. I worked and saved. Heather spent and struggled. I lived within my means. Heather expected bailouts. I built independence. Heather cultivated dependence. The first major financial entanglement came during Heather's junior year of college. She called me in tears one night, confessing she had maxed out 3 credit cards and couldn't make the minimum payments. She begged me not to tell our parents. "They'll be so disappointed in me, Amanda," she sobbed. "Dad's always talking about financial responsibility. I can't bear to see his face when he finds out." Against my better judgment, I transferred $15,000 to her account, money I'd been saving for graduate school. Heather promised to pay me back in monthly installments once she graduated and found a job. Those payments never materialized. When I gently reminded her about our agreement a year later, she grew defensive. "I thought that was a gift," she said. "You know how much I struggled in college. It's not fair to hold that over my head now." 2 years after college, Heather met Thomas Bradford, a charming sales representative for a pharmaceutical company. After a whirlwind 6-month romance, they announced their engagement with plans for a summer wedding at an exclusive vineyard venue. The estimated cost exceeded their budget by thousands, but my parents insisted on making it happen. "It's her special day," my mother said when I questioned the extravagance. "We'll find a way." Finding a way meant asking me to contribute $5,000 toward the flower arrangements and photography. Once again, I complied, telling myself it was just once for a special occasion. I ignored the sinking feeling that it would never be just once. After the 2008 financial crisis, my parents' retirement savings took a significant hit. My father began dropping hints about his concerns for their future. "We didn't plan for the market to crash," he would say during family dinners. "Thankfully, we have successful children who understand family obligation." These comments were always directed primarily at me, the child with the stable tech job and growing savings account. Meanwhile, Heather and Thomas established a lifestyle well beyond their means. Despite modest salaries, they took luxury vacations, drove expensive cars, and dressed in designer clothes. Instagram posts showcased their apparently perfect life, while private family conversations revealed constant financial stress. I established clear boundaries around money after the wedding contribution. When Heather called asking for help with car payments, I suggested budgeting strategies instead of sending cash. When my parents hinted about helping them renovate their aging kitchen, I recommended a home equity loan based on their substantial property value. These boundaries were met with hurt feelings and accusations of selfishness. "After everything we've done for you," became my mother's favorite guilt trip. The irony that I had put myself through college on scholarships while they paid Heather's full tuition was apparently lost on her. Looking back, I can now identify the warning signs I missed in the months before discovering the mortgage fraud. There was the family dinner in November where my father asked unusually specific questions about my salary and savings. There was my mother borrowing my driver's license for an insurance form and returning it 3 days later instead of immediately as promised. There was the stack of mail that disappeared from my apartment counter when Heather stopped by unexpectedly to catch up. Most tellingly, in January, my parents and Heather took a weekend trip to the coast that I wasn't invited to. My mother explained it as just a little family planning session without elaborating on what they were planning or why I, as family, wasn't included. All these peculiarities made sense in retrospect. They weren't random events, but calculated steps in a premeditated plan to use my financial stability for Heather's benefit. The parents who had taught me about honesty and integrity had decided those values didn't apply when it came to getting my sister the house she wanted. The most painful realization was that this betrayal wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. It required weeks of planning, multiple coordinated deceptions, and the collective agreement that my financial security was an acceptable sacrifice for Heather's comfort. They had discussed it, planned it, and executed it together, all while smiling at me across holiday dinner tables. This context explains why, on that Sunday afternoon in April, I drove to my parents' home with a folder of mortgage documents and a heart full of questions that deserved answers. It explains why, despite knowing what I might lose, I was prepared to demand accountability from the people who had raised me to value honesty above all else. Sunday dinners at my parents' house had been a tradition since I moved out for college. Even during busy periods at work, I made the 30-minute drive to maintain the connection to my family. This particular Sunday felt different. The familiar route now seemed to lead to the home of strangers rather than the safe haven of my childhood. I prepared carefully for this confrontation. The morning before, I met with my friend Zoe, who worked in banking, to review all the mortgage documents. She confirmed my suspicions. This was clear fraud with serious legal implications. "Amanda, this isn't just a family disagreement," she warned. "This is a federal crime with potential jail time. Are you sure you want to handle this yourself first? You could go directly to the police." I considered her advice, but decided I needed to give my family one chance to explain themselves. Perhaps there was some misunderstanding, some explanation that would make sense of the unthinkable. Deep down, I knew this was wishful thinking, but I owed our shared history this final opportunity for honesty. In my car outside their house, I rehearsed what I would say, determined to remain calm and factual. When anxiety threatened to overwhelm me, I focused on my breathing. 10 minutes passed before I felt composed enough to walk up the familiar brick pathway to the front door. My mother answered with her usual warm smile, pulling me into a hug that felt both familiar and foreign. "Amanda." We were starting to worry. "Dinner's almost ready." My father called from the living room without looking up from his newspaper. "There she is. Thought you might be working late again." The casual normality of their greeting heightened the surreal quality of the moment. Did they really think everything was business as usual? Or were they just that confident in my compliance once I discovered their scheme? I placed my purse and the folder of documents on the entryway table, following my mother into the kitchen where the aroma of pot roast filled the air. I noticed new granite countertops and a wine refrigerator that hadn't been there during my last visit. "The kitchen looks different," I commented. "Did you remodel?" My mother beamed with pride. "Just a few updates. Your father finally agreed it was time. Do you like it?" Before I could answer, the front door opened and Heather's voice rang through the house. "Sorry we're late. Traffic was insane coming from Bellevue." Heather and Thomas entered the kitchen moments later. My sister looked radiant in an expensive dress I recognized from a luxury brand, her wrist adorned with a diamond tennis bracelet I hadn't seen before. Thomas nodded in my direction, his attention immediately captured by his buzzing phone. "Amanda," Heather exclaimed, air kissing near my cheek. "It's been forever. You look tired. Are they working you too hard at that tech place?" I studied my sister's face, searching for signs of guilt or discomfort. There were none. Either she was an exceptional actress, or she genuinely saw nothing wrong with what they had done. Dinner proceeded with the usual family small talk. My father discussed a difficult client, my mother shared gossip about neighbors, and Heather described the challenges of decorating such a big house. I contributed minimally, observing rather than participating, gathering courage for what would come next. After my mother served apple pie for dessert, I excused myself briefly, retrieving the folder from my purse. When I returned, I remained standing rather than taking my seat. "I need to discuss something important with everyone," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. For pairs of eyes turned toward me with varying degrees of interest. I placed the mortgage documents on the table and opened the folder. Would anyone like to explain why I owe $600,000 for Heather's house? The silence that followed was absolute. My mother's fork clattered against her plate. My father's throat cleared in the particular way it did when he was buying time. Heather froze mid-bite, her eyes darting to our parents. Thomas suddenly found his wedding band fascinating, twisting it around his finger. My father recovered first, adopting the authoritative posture he used when ending family disagreements. Amanda, this isn't the appropriate time. We can discuss this privately later. No, I replied firmly. This affects all of us, and I want answers now. My mother stood abruptly. Let me clear these dishes first. Conversations like this are better without messes. The dishes can wait, Mom. Please sit down. Reluctantly, she lowered herself back into her chair, hands fidgeting with her napkin. My father sighed heavily, the sound of a temporary arrangement? I repeated. You took out a 30-year mortgage in my name without my knowledge or consent. That's not a misunderstanding. That's fraud. Such dramatic language, my mother interjected. We're all family here. My father nodded in agreement. This is just until they can refinance in a year or two when Thomas gets his promotion. Their names will replace yours, and everything will be straightened out. And in the meantime? I asked. Who's making the $3,600 monthly payments? Well, my father shifted uncomfortably. We thought, given your financial situation and generous salary, you could handle those payments temporarily. Pay for your sister. It's your duty. The casual entitlement in his voice stunned me. $3,600 monthly represented more than half my take-home pay. They expected me to sacrifice my own housing plans, retirement savings, and financial security without even a discussion. Your credit score was just sitting there, my mother added, as though my excellent credit was a resource going to waste. We put it to good use. You make six figures now, Heather finally spoke, her initial shock giving way to defensiveness. It's not like you can't afford it. And you're still single, my mother added, delivering the familiar jab with practiced precision. You don't need a house yet. Heather and Thomas are starting a family soon. The conversation rapidly deteriorated as my sister's entitlement emerged in full force. Gone was her initial fear, replaced by righteous indignation that I would question this arrangement. Don't be so dramatic, Amanda, Heather scoffed. It's just paperwork. The bank got their money, we got our house, and your credit will recover eventually. You've always been so selfish about money, she continued, gaining confidence from our parents nodding approval. After everything we've done for you, you can't even be happy that I finally have my dream home. What exactly have you done for me? I asked quietly. The question hung in the air, unanswered. Thomas, speaking for the first time, attempted a reasonable tone. Amanda, we understand this is unorthodox, but the housing market was so competitive. We'd have lost this opportunity without some creative financing. Creative financing, I repeated slowly. Is that what we're calling felony fraud now? My father's face darkened. Watch. No, I said firmly. We absolutely did not discuss this. I would remember someone asking to put me $600,000 in debt. You said you wanted to help your sister, my mother insisted, her voice rising. You were tired after working late, but you definitely agreed. Your signature is right there on the documents, my father pointed to the papers. How can you deny it now? The gaslighting was so blatant it was almost impressive. They were attempting to convince me that I had consented to something that never happened, that I had signed documents I had never seen, that I had agreed to sacrifice my financial future during a conversation that never took place. That's not my signature, I said, controlling the tremor in my voice. It's a forgery. I was in San Francisco for a conference on December 12th. I have plane tickets, hotel receipts, and conference registration to prove it. My statement landed like a bomb, shattering their narrative. The room fell silent again as they processed the implications. I wasn't just questioning their story. I had evidence to disprove it. "This is fraud," I continued, my voice gaining strength. "You forged my signature on legal documents. You stole my identity to obtain a mortgage. These are serious crimes with serious consequences." My father's expression hardened from dismissive to threatening. "Don't use the kind of language in this house, Amanda. You're making accusations you can't take back." My mother began to cry, tears appearing on cue. "How could you accuse us of such a thing? After everything we've sacrificed for you." Heather's panic returned, her earlier confidence evaporating. "You wouldn't ruin my life over this, would you? It's just a house, Amanda. You wouldn't send your own family to jail." "Be reasonable," Thomas urged, finally putting down his phone. "We can work this out without involving authorities. There's no need to destroy the family over a misunderstanding." I looked at each of them in turn, these people who shared my blood, but apparently none of my values. The betrayal cut deep, but clarity was emerging through the pain. This wasn't a family supporting each other through challenges. This was financial exploitation disguised as family obligation. "I'm going to fix this," I said, gathering the documents and standing to leave. "But not in the way you're hoping." "Amanda, wait," my mother called as I walked toward the door. "Let's talk about this." "We've talked enough," I replied without turning around. "I think I finally understand what family means to you." As I closed the door behind me, he couldn't have been more wrong about what the right thing was. The drive away from my parents' house passed in a blur. My hands shook so badly on the steering wheel that I had to pull over at Franklin Park, unable to continue safely. In the quiet privacy of my car, the full weight of what had happened crashed over me. The family I had trusted completely had betrayed me in the most fundamental way, violating not just my finances, but my very identity. Tears came in violent waves, accompanied by something between laughter and screaming. The absurdity and audacity of their actions seemed unreal. How could the people who raised me to value honesty decide that my financial future was an acceptable sacrifice for Heather's comfort? How could they look me in the eye over Sunday dinners knowing what they had done? When I could finally breathe normally again, I called Zoe. "They did it," I said when she answered. "They actually forged my signature and took out the mortgage. They expected me to pay for it, Zoe. They called it my duty." "Where are you?" she asked immediately. "Franklin Park." I had to pull over. "Stay there. I'm coming to get you." 20 minutes later, Zoe found me still sitting in my car, staring blankly ahead. She drove me to her apartment, made tea, and listened as I recounted the confrontation in detail. When I finished, she didn't offer platitudes about family reconciliation or forgiveness. Instead, she offered something I needed more: validation. What they did was criminal, Amanda. Not just morally wrong, but actually illegal. You need to protect yourself. I spent that night on her couch, falling into restless sleep only to wake repeatedly with my heart racing. By morning, the initial shock had given way to the grim reality of my situation. This wasn't just a family dispute. It was a financial disaster with far-reaching consequences. My credit score had plummeted from 810 to 580 overnight. The dream condo I'd been planning to buy was now completely out of reach. Even renewing the lease on my current apartment might be difficult with such damaged credit. Every financial plan I had carefully constructed over years had been destroyed by a single forged signature. I spent the morning making calls, each one more discouraging than the last. The car loan I had been pre-approved for last month was now denied due to significant changes in credit status. My apartment management company expressed concerns about my lease renewal given the recent credit report. My carefully accumulated savings, intended for a down payment, would now be needed for legal fees and credit repair services. The $600,000 mortgage wasn't just a number on paper. With interest over 30 years, my family had effectively saddled me with a $1.3 million liability. Even if I wanted to make the payments, it would be mathematically impossible on my salary. Beyond the financial impact, the emotional devastation was profound. Every memory of family gatherings now required re-examination. Had they been planning this during Christmas dinner? Was that why Heather asked so many questions about my job security? Was my mother's unusual interest in my 5-year plan just research for their fraud? I couldn't concentrate at work. During a team meeting presentation, I completely lost my train of thought mid-sentence, standing frozen before my colleagues until my manager gently suggested we take a break. I found myself crying in bathroom stalls between meetings, splashing cold water on my face before returning to my desk with forced composure. Sleep became elusive. When I did manage to doze off, I would wake suddenly with my heart pounding, certain I was falling even though I was lying still. I lost weight as my appetite disappeared, replacing meals with coffee that made my anxiety worse, but at least kept me functioning. As I struggled to process the betrayal, my family launched a coordinated pressure campaign. My phone filled with missed calls and voicemails, each more manipulative than the last. My mother's messages started with concern, "We're worried about you," progressed to guilt, "Your father couldn't sleep all night," and culminated in emotional blackmail. This stress could trigger his heart condition. My father's approach was more direct, thinly veiled threats about family reputation and irreparable damage to relationships. Heather's messages were the most revealing. What began as tearful apologies quickly devolved into accusations. "You're destroying my marriage. Thomas is talking about divorce. If we lose this house, it's on you." Not once did she acknowledge that the house was obtained through fraud or express genuine remorse for her role in it. The pressure escalated when my parents showed up unannounced at my apartment building one evening. My mother created a scene in the lobby, sobbing loudly about her troubled daughter until neighbors began to stare. I refused to come down, texting that I would call security if they didn't leave. They departed, but not before my father informed the building manager that he was concerned about my mental state. The isolation was crushing. Extended family members I had always been close to began calling with concern that thinly disguised their real purpose to convince me to work things out privately. Cousins I had grown up with suggested I was overreacting. My Aunt Linda, my mother's sister, explained that this is just how families help each other. Only my brother Kevin, who had moved to Chicago years ago and maintained limited contact with our parents, offered genuine support. They tried something similar with my student loans, he revealed during a late-night call. I shut it down immediately. "I should have warned you they might target you next." Seeking perspective beyond my immediate circle, I reached out to human resources at work. In a confidential meeting with Diana, our HR director, I explained the situation without naming names, concerned about potential impacts on my employment. First, Diana assured me, "Your job is not at risk. This happened to you. You didn't cause it. Second, you're not alone. Financial abuse within families is shockingly common." She connected me with the company's employee assistance program, which provided free sessions with a therapist specializing in family trauma. In my first session with Dr. Bryant, I finally said the words I had been avoiding. "My family stole from me, and I don't know if I can ever forgive them." Dr. Bryant helped me understand that my conflicted feelings were normal. "You're mourning the family you thought you had," she explained. "It's a profound loss that requires grief, not just anger." Through therapy and a support group for financial abuse survivors, I discovered that my experience, while painful, was far from unique. Stories similar to mine emerged from people of all backgrounds: parents taking out credit cards in their children's names, siblings emptying joint accounts, adult children draining parents' retirement funds. The commonality of these experiences provided cold comfort, but helped me understand that this wasn't my fault. I hadn't missed obvious warning signs or been uniquely naive. My family had exploited the very trust that healthy families depend on, counting on my loyalty to outweigh my self-protection. As April turned to May, I began to emerge from the initial fog of betrayal and grief. The path forward wasn't clear, but I knew I couldn't continue in limbo. waiting for a resolution that wouldn't come without action. My family had made their choices. Now I needed to make mine. With the initial shock subsiding, I turned my attention to practical solutions. My dining table disappeared under stacks of research, printouts about mortgage fraud cases, identity theft statistics, legal precedents involving family members. I learned that family financial fraud was both more common and less prosecuted than stranger identity theft, often because victims were reluctant to pursue charges against relatives. The statute of limitations for mortgage fraud gave me time to consider my options, but the debt continued to accumulate interest while I deliberated. Each passing month added thousands to the total and prolonged the damage to my credit. I needed to act, but the potential consequences for my family weighed heavily on me. Despite everything, the prospect of my parents facing criminal charges was difficult to contemplate. I booked consultations with several professionals, starting with Sarah Chin, a financial advisor specializing in identity theft recovery. Her assessment was blunt but clarifying. Even with the most aggressive credit repair strategy, recovering from mortgage fraud this significant will take at least 2 years, she explained. And that's only possible if the fraudulent debt is completely removed from your name through legal action. Next, I met with Jessica Alvarez. This is textbook fraud, she stated after reviewing my documents. Forged signatures, clear financial harm, documented alibi during the supposed signing. You have an exceptionally strong case. She outlined my options, ranging from least to most severe, a civil lawsuit against my family members to transfer the mortgage to their names, a formal fraud report to the mortgage company without pressing criminal charges, or full criminal prosecution for identity theft and mortgage fraud. Criminal charges would likely result in significant penalties, Jessica warned. For first-time offenders in a case this size, it could mean fines, probation, or even prison time, especially since the amount exceeds $500,000. The thought of my parents in court, much less prison, made me physically ill. But Jessica's next point resonated deeply. Amanda, consider this from another angle. If they've done this to you, what's to prevent them from doing it to someone else? Sometimes legal consequences are the only thing that breaks these patterns of behavior. With this framework in mind, I began methodically building my case. I requested certified copies of all mortgage documentation from the bank and organized my evidence chronologically. My work records confirmed I was presenting at the San Francisco conference during the mortgage signing. Flight and hotel receipts established my alibi beyond question. Emails and text messages from that period showed no mention of any mortgage agreement. I paid for a professional handwriting analysis of the forged signatures, which confirmed they were highly unlikely to have been produced by the same individual as my authentic signature samples. I documented my sister's Instagram posts about the house, capturing the timeline of their purchase alongside my complete absence from the process. While gathering evidence, I received increasingly frantic communication from my family. My father left voicemails demanding I call him before this gets out of hand. My mother sent long emotional emails about family loyalty. Heather alternated between teary apologies and angry accusations, sometimes in the same message. I decided to give them one final opportunity to take responsibility. After consulting with Jessica, I placed a carefully worded call to my parents' home, recording it with their knowledge as advised by my attorney. I'm prepared to pursue legal action regarding the fraudulent mortgage, I stated calmly after my father answered. Before I do, I want to give you the opportunity to transfer the mortgage to your names voluntarily. His response confirmed I had made the right decision to record the call. You'll regret this, Amanda, he said, his voice cold. Family disputes should stay within the family. If you pursue this, don't expect to be welcomed back. When my mother took the phone, her approach was predictably emotional. This will kill your father, Amanda. His blood pressure is already dangerously high because of the situation. Is that what you want? To send him to an early grave? Heather called separately, her husband audible in the background, coaching her responses. My attorney cousin says we could counter-sue you for defamation, she threatened unconvincingly. You've always been jealous of me. That's what this is really about. Their responses eliminated any remaining doubt. They showed no remorse, accepted no responsibility, and offered no solution that didn't involve me paying for their fraud. They were counting on family obligation to outweigh my self-protection, just as they had when taking out the mortgage. That night, I sat alone in my apartment considering the gravity of my next step. Once I filed an official police report, there would be no turning back. Criminal proceedings, once initiated, would continue even if I had second thoughts. Family relationships, already damaged, might be permanently destroyed. I thought about holiday gatherings, childhood memories, the shared history that defines family. I thought about my mother teaching me to bake, my father helping with science projects, Heather and I building elaborate blanket forts as children. I thought about all I would be losing by pursuing justice. Then I thought about all I had already lost. My financial security. My trust in the people who should be most trustworthy. My belief in the family narrative we had constructed together. They had already broken what was precious. I was simply acknowledging the damage. The next morning, I drove to the police station. Officer Karen Martinez took my initial statement with professional compassion, clearly familiar with the complicated emotions involved in family fraud cases. Take your time, she said as I hesitated over certain details. I know this isn't easy. For 2 hours, I provided documentation and answered questions. I explained the discovery of the mortgage, the confrontation with my family, their continued refusal to accept responsibility. Officer Martinez took meticulous notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but never questioning my decision to file charges. Based on the evidence you've provided, this will be referred to our Financial Crimes Division, she explained when we finished. A detective will contact you within 48 hours to proceed with the investigation. As I signed the official statement, a profound sense of both grief and relief washed over me. The path ahead would be difficult, but for the first time since discovering the mortgage, I felt I was moving forward rather than drowning in place. With the police report anticipating potential backlash from my family, I implemented new security measures. I changed the locks on my apartment, informed building management about the situation, and redirected my mail to a secure P.O. box. I updated passwords on all financial accounts and created new email addresses for essential communications. At work, I met privately with my manager Brian to explain why I might need flexibility for upcoming legal proceedings. His support was immediate and practical. Take whatever time you need, he assured me. Your position is secure, and we can adjust deadlines accordingly. I created a small but reliable support system. Zoe became my emergency contact. My therapist provided additional sessions during this critical period. My brother Kevin offered to fly in from Chicago if I needed in-person support during court proceedings. With these preparations in place, I braced myself for what would come next. The wheels of justice had begun turning, but the emotional journey was far from over. Through May and into June, the legal process advanced methodically. The bank's fraud investigation concluded with a definitive finding. The mortgage application contained a forged signature and fraudulent information. The mortgage company initiated formal proceedings to pursue the responsible parties, removing my name from the debt while the case progressed. Detective Ramirez from the Financial Crimes Division built a comprehensive case, interviewing bank employees who processed the original application and obtaining security footage from the closing date showing my father and sister at the signing table. The evidence was overwhelming and irrefutable. The district attorney's office determined there was sufficient evidence to pursue criminal charges against my father as the primary orchestrator, with my mother and sister as accomplices. They would face charges of identity theft, forgery, and mortgage fraud, all felonies given the dollar amount involved. Jessica called with news that formal charges would be filed the following week. The DA is preparing to serve documents, she explained. They'll likely arrange for your family members to turn themselves in to avoid a public arrest. As the reality of criminal proceedings sank in, I experienced a fresh wave of doubt. Was I prepared to see this through to its conclusion, potentially sending my family to prison? After sleepless deliberation, I realized there was one final approach I hadn't tried. Is there any way I could be present when they're served? I asked Jessica. One last opportunity to see their reaction face to face? Jessica made arrangements with Detective Ramirez. We learned through family social media that my parents were hosting a birthday dinner for Heather that weekend at their home. The timing seemed fitting for this final confrontation. That Saturday evening, I parked down the street from my parents' house, waiting for Detective Ramirez's signal. My stomach churned with anxiety, but a strange calm had settled over me. Whatever happened next, I was reclaiming my narrative from those who had attempted to rewrite it without my consent. I approached the house as Detective Ramirez waited discreetly in his unmarked car. Through the dining room window, I could see my family gathered around the table, candles glowing on a birthday cake, faces animated in conversation. The scene was so normal, so familiar, it momentarily took my breath away. These people who had committed fraud against me were still capable of celebrating birthdays and sharing meals as though nothing was wrong. My knock interrupted their celebration. My mother answered, her initial smile freezing when she recognized me. "Amanda," she said, recovering quickly. "What a surprise. We're celebrating Heather's birthday." "I know," I replied. "May I come in?" She hesitated before stepping aside. The conversation in the dining room fell silent as I entered. My father stood abruptly, napkins still tucked into his collar. Heather and Thomas exchanged alarmed glances. "What are you doing here?" my father demanded. "I wanted to be present for this," I said simply, taking a seat at the empty place setting that had once been mine at family gatherings. "Present for what?" Heather asked, her voice high with nervousness. "You'll see in about 2 minutes," I replied, checking my watch. The doorbell rang precisely on schedule. "Paul, Eleanor, Heather, and Thomas Wilson?" Detective Ramirez asked formally. My father nodded stiffly. "I'm serving you with these documents regarding criminal charges of identity theft, forgery, and mortgage fraud," he continued, placing a thick envelope on the table. "You're required to appear at the county courthouse on Monday morning at 9 a.m. to enter your plea. Failure to appear will result in arrest warrants being issued." The officer provided a brief explanation of the charges and potential penalties. Mortgage fraud involving this amount carried potential prison sentences of up to 30 years, though first-time offenders typically received significantly less. The financial penalties could exceed twice the fraudulent amount obtained. As the reality of the situation dawned on them, my family's reactions were revealing. My father's face drained completely of color, the authority he had wielded so confidently now crumbling. My mother collapsed into a dining chair, hand pressed against her chest in a gesture that would have seemed melodramatic, if not for her genuine distress. Heather began crying, her birthday celebration forgotten as she gripped Thomas's arm. Thomas immediately pulled out his phone, presumably to call his family's lawyer. When the officers departed after confirming my family understood their obligations, the facade of family unity shattered completely. "You would send your own parents to jail?" my father asked, his voice barely audible. "You did this, not me," I replied calmly. "You had multiple opportunities to make this right. You're destroying this family." Heather sobbed, mascara streaming down her face. "You destroyed it when you stole my identity," I countered. "This is simply the consequence." My father, ever the pragmatist, shifted quickly to negotiation mode. "We can make this right financially," he offered. "We'll sell investments, take out loans against the business. Whatever it takes." "It's too late for that," I said. "I gave you that opportunity months ago." My mother reached across the table, grasping for my hand. I pulled back instinctively. "Amanda, please," she begged. "Keep this in the family. We can work it out privately." Thomas, speaking directly for the first time, adopted his professional sales voice. There must be a solution that doesn't involve the courts. Perhaps a payment plan, or we could sell the house immediately. The house is already in foreclosure, I informed them. The bank initiated proceedings when the fraud was confirmed. We'll take full responsibility with the bank, my father promised. Just drop the criminal charges. That's not how this works, I explained. This isn't a civil dispute I can simply withdraw. You committed felony fraud. The state is pressing charges based on evidence. The negotiation continued for nearly an hour, growing increasingly desperate as they realized I wouldn't be swayed by the same emotional manipulation that had worked in the past. Eventually, my father sat back in his chair, anger replacing his initial shock. You've made your choice, he said coldly. No, I corrected him. You made it for me when you decided my financial future was an acceptable price for Heather's house. I left them at the table with their ruined birthday celebration and the legal documents that would change all our lives. As I walked to my car, I felt neither triumph nor satisfaction, only the quiet certainty that I had finally stood firm in my own defense. News of the charges spread quickly through our extended family. The reactions divided predictably along lines of convenience and self-interest. Those who had benefited from my parents' financial arrangements in the past condemned my disloyalty. Those who had experienced similar pressure expressed quiet support. My Aunt Linda, my mother's older sister, called to express unexpected understanding. Your mother tried something similar with your grandfather's estate, she revealed. I always wondered when her manipulative tendencies would finally cross a legal line. My Uncle Richard, my father's brother, left an angry voicemail accusing me of destroying the Wilson name out of petty revenge. Invitations to family weddings and gatherings were rescinded. Holiday plans were conspicuously reordered to exclude me. The preliminary court hearing was scheduled for early July. In the intervening weeks, the bank officially removed the fraudulent mortgage from my credit record, beginning the slow process of restoring my financial standing. The police investigation concluded with a recommendation for prosecution, and the district attorney seemed confident in the case. My parents hired Gerald Hamilton, an expensive defense attorney known for handling white-collar crime cases. Heather and Thomas listed their house for sale at a reduced price, hoping for a quick transaction to mitigate their losses. There were discussions of a potential plea arrangement that would reduce potential jail time in exchange for full financial restitution and probation. As the legal proceedings advanced, I experienced conflicting emotions. Relief at the restoration of my credit and financial standing mixed with profound sadness at the permanent alteration of my family relationships. The justice I had sought came at a high personal cost, but the alternative would have been even more damaging, a lifetime of financial exploitation justified as family obligation. The legal resolution came in late August, for months after I discovered the fraudulent mortgage. My parents accepted a plea agreement that acknowledged their primary responsibility in the scheme. The charges against Heather were reduced in exchange for her testimony confirming our parents had orchestrated the fraud. Under the agreement, the mortgage was officially transferred to my parents' names. Heather and Thomas sold their house at a slight loss, using the proceeds to establish a repayment plan for my legal expenses. My credit record was fully restored within 6 months, though the emotional recovery would take far longer. I declined to pursue maximum penalties, not out of misplaced loyalty, but from a desire to move forward rather than remain entangled in protracted legal battles. The settlement included a formal written apology that acknowledged the harm done, though the sincerity behind the legally mandated words remained questionable. With the legal chapter closed, I focused on rebuilding my life. I moved to a new apartment in a different neighborhood, creating physical distance from locations associated with painful memories. I implemented stricter security measures for all financial accounts and established regular credit monitoring services. At work, my performance gradually improved as the constant stress of legal proceedings lifted. My manager Brian, who had been supportive throughout the ordeal, recommended me for a project management position that represented an unexpected promotion. The crisis management skills I had developed through necessity became professional assets in my new role. Within a year, I had saved enough to purchase a modest condo in a quiet building with excellent security. I insisted on a cash-only deal, unwilling to engage with mortgage lenders despite my restored credit. The property was smaller than what I might have qualified for, but it was mine completely, free from debt or shared obligation. Throughout this transformation, my support network proved invaluable. My friendship with Zoe deepened through shared experiences that tested its strength. My coworker Marcus became a trusted mentor, offering professional guidance without prying into personal details. My therapist Dr. Bryant helped me navigate the complex grief of family estrangement. The support group for financial abuse survivors provided perspective and practical advice from those further along in their recovery journeys. Through their stories, I learned that healthy recovery wasn't about forgetting the betrayal, but about integrating it into a larger narrative that didn't define my entire identity. When I began dating again, I approached relationships with clearer boundaries and expectations. On my third date with Daniel, a software developer I met through a mutual friend, I explained my experience with financial boundaries. Rather than being frightened away by my directness, he appreciated the clarity and shared his own experiences with financial pressure from extended family. The most significant growth came in my ability to recognize and resist manipulation. Tactics that had once made me question my own judgment now appeared transparent and predictable. I became comfortable saying no without lengthy justification. I recognized that genuine love doesn't demand financial sacrifice as proof of loyalty. 6 months after the legal settlement, my mother reached out with a tentative invitation to coffee. Our meeting was awkward, but represented a small step toward a new kind of relationship based on reality rather than manipulation. My father took longer to make contact, his pride damaged by the public acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Heather's resentment persisted, though the entitlement that had characterized our earlier interactions diminished considerably. Financial necessity had forced her to downsize her lifestyle and take greater responsibility for her choices. Whether this represented genuine growth or merely practical adaptation remained unclear. For holiday gatherings, I established clear boundaries. I would attend family events on my terms only, maintaining control over my involvement and departing when I chose. Gift exchanges would be modest and proportional. Financial discussions were explicitly off-limits. These boundaries were non-negotiable, and I enforced them consistently despite occasional testing. The most valuable lesson from this painful experience was the redefinition of family obligation. I learned that genuine family support enhances rather than diminishes individual well-being. It operates within mutually respected boundaries and acknowledges the autonomy of all parties. It never requires sacrifice of one member for another's benefit. I discovered the difference between generosity and exploitation. True generosity stems from free choice and authentic desire to help, never from manipulation or obligation. It respects the dignity of both giver and receiver, creating connection rather than resentment. Most importantly, I recognized that financial independence isn't selfish, but essential for genuine relationship health. By protecting my resources and boundaries, I preserved my ability to make truly voluntary contributions to causes and people I valued. 1 year after discovering the fraudulent mortgage, I sat on the balcony of my new condo, watching the sunset over the city. The apartment was modest, but truly mine, purchased without debt or compromise. My career was advancing on my terms. My relationships, though fewer, were based on mutual respect rather than obligation. The family I had known was irrevocably changed, but in its place was the possibility of relationships based on truth rather than manipulation. The pain hadn't disappeared completely, but it had transformed into wisdom that guided rather than limited me. If you've ever faced betrayal from those who should protect you most, know that recovery is possible. Protecting yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Setting boundaries isn't cruel, it's healthy. Requiring accountability isn't vengeful, it's the foundation of genuine relationship repair. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between family obligation and self-protection? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more authentic discussions about family dynamics and personal boundaries. Thank you for accompanying me on this journey, and I wish you the courage to stand firm in your own truth, whatever challenges you may face.